What if the place meant to save lives started calling out for the dead? Hospitals are supposed to be safe, full of doctors, nurses, and the sound of healing machines. But what happens when the emergency alerts begin to summon you to rooms that no longer exist? Stay with me till the end. This creepy emergency alert story, told by a nurse who lived it, will leave you questioning every sound in the night. I've been a nurse for years, long enough to know the difference between chaos and routine. Hospitals breathe in patterns, alarms, monitors, overhead pages. To us, it's structured noise. Every sound has meaning, every call carries weight. But one night, the hospital made a sound it should never have made. It was near to a. The halls were dim, that strange quiet hum settling over the unit when most patients are finally asleep. I was charting vitals at the nurse's station when the overhead crackled. We all froze, waiting for the familiar chime. Instead, what came through was not the operator's voice. It was a whisper, a child's voice. "Help me." 2 words, fragile, desperate. They floated down the corridor through every speaker. I glanced at the board. No pediatric patients. Our unit was strictly adult care. Pediatrics was 2 floors below, locked after visiting hours. Even if a child pressed a call button, it would never go to overhead. That system was sealed, controlled only by the switchboard. The charge nurse picked up the phone, her hand trembling slightly. She called down to the operator. I watched her face pale as she listened. When she hung up, her words sent chills down my spine. They said they didn't page anything. The air changed. Suddenly, the familiar hum of machines felt louder, heavier. The usual comfort of routine dissolved into unease. We tried to laugh it off, feedback, maybe, or a glitch in the wiring. But hospitals don't glitch like that. And I've learned, over long nights, that when something doesn't fit the rules of medicine or technology, it belongs to something else. Later that night, I was checking on a patient recovering from surgery when I passed an empty room. The door was open, the bed perfectly made. I swear I heard it again. That same voice, closer this time. "Help me." I froze in the doorway. The bathroom was open, the monitors were unplugged. No one inside, but I felt it like someone small was watching me from the corner, where the shadows seemed just a little too thick. I backed away, forcing myself to keep walking. My heart hammered against my ribs, begging me to run, but my body kept its professional pace. Nurses don't run unless it's life or death. That's drilled into us. Still, every step away felt like I was abandoning someone. An hour later, we had a rapid response in ICU. A patient's oxygen saturation dropped suddenly, alarms screaming. The team rushed in. I grabbed the crash cart, pushing fast, adrenaline buzzing through me. We stabilized him quickly. His breathing improved, color returned to his face, relief washed over the room. Then, almost immediately, another call blasted over the speakers. Rapid response. Room 226. The name that scrolled across the board made my blood run cold. It was the same patient, same name, same date of birth, same medical record number. But he was lying right in front of us in ICU. We thought it was a mistake. The charge nurse called MedSurg to confirm. Her voice shook as she asked, "Do you have Mr. S in 226? "Yes," the MedSurg nurse replied. "He just bottomed out. We're starting fluids now. 2 different units, 2 different emergencies." But the system claimed it was the same man. For the next half hour, both units fought to stabilize him. ICU documented blood gases. MedSurg charted blood pressure interventions. The electronic health record flagged conflicts, confused by data pouring in from 2 places at once. The system wasn't wrong. It was impossible. When I finally saw him later that week, pale and still in his ICU bed, I couldn't shake it. For those few moments it was as if he had lived in 2 places. As if the hospital couldn't decide where his soul belonged. But the strangest moment came at the end of that same week. We had a scheduled fire drill. Everyone knew it wasn't real. Overhead paged it clearly. We moved through protocol.com but efficient. Security monitored cameras, checking hallways, exits, making sure everything was by the book. After the drill, security called us into the office. They looked unsettled. One officer said he'd seen a group of staff sprinting down hallway 3C, pushing a gurney like they were in the middle of a real code. The description was detailed blue scrubs, rapid movement, the rattling wheels of the stretcher echoing. But hallway 3C had been sealed for years, closed off after asbestos was discovered. The walls blocked, the doors boarded. No one could have been there. They tried to replay the footage, but the segment was gone, erased. Every other camera feed saved. That one was missing. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think about the child's voice, or the patient who lived in two places, or the phantom team rushing down a hallway that no longer existed. But hospitals hold more than life and death. They hold everything that happens in between. The echoes, the leftovers, the moments that never fully close. Sometimes, when the overhead crackles late at night, my chest tightens. I wait for the familiar chime, the calm operator's voice, but a part of me braces, waiting to hear it again. That soft, pleading whisper, "Help me." And I wonder what happens if one night, I finally answer. I have worked night shifts in the hospital long enough to know the difference between real fear and nerves, but nothing prepared me for the night the emergency alert went off. When it shouldn't have. It was just after midnight. The halls were silent except for the steady beeping of monitors and the low hiss of oxygen. I was finishing meds when the overhead system clicked on. The sound is usually sharp, mechanical, followed by a calm operator's voice. This time, it wasn't. Instead, the speakers crackled, and a voice dragged through every corner of the unit. Code blue, basement, morgue. The words sent a shiver down my spine. We don't page codes to the morgue, ever. That's the one place where code blues don't exist. I looked at the others at the nurses' station. Their faces told me they'd heard the same thing. For a moment, no one moved. Then training kicked in. We grabbed the crash cart, called security, and rushed toward the elevators. My hands shook as I pressed the button, the metal doors groaning open like they hadn't been used in years. The basement was colder, quieter. Fluorescent lights buzzed above, some flickering weakly. The morgue was down the corridor, its heavy door locked as always. But when we reached it, the door stood wide open. The room was empty. No body trays, no staff, no patient. Just the metallic smell of disinfectant and something else, something faint, like old flowers left too long in stagnant water. The charge nurse whispered, "This isn't right." Her voice cracked. We searched anyway, checked corners, closets, even behind the heavy freezer doors. Nothing, and yet, I swear I heard something. Not loud but steady, a slow, ragged breathing just behind me. Every time I turned, it stopped. Security reviewed the system logs. The page hadn't come from the operator. The system flagged a manual activation, but no one was in the control booth at that moment. No fingerprints, no keycard use. It was as if the building itself had called us. We wheeled the cart back upstairs, embarrassed but shaken. No incident report was filed, just a quiet note marked system malfunction. But the truth hung heavy in our silence. A week later, I was rounding on patients when the overhead clicked on again. I felt my stomach twist. The voice was clearer this time. Urgent. Code blue. Room 12, hurry. We ran. Room 12 was at the far end of the hall. I pushed the cart as fast as I could. My heart was pounding, every second stretching long and sharp. When we burst through the door, the bed was made. Crisp, empty. The monitors, dark. I swear, for a split second, I saw an outline on the bed. Small, frail, like a child curled beneath the sheets. But when I blinked, it was gone. We stood frozen in the doorway. Adrenaline had nowhere to go. My body was ready to save a life that wasn't there. That night, I couldn't shake the thought. Emergency alerts aren't mistakes. They don't come from nowhere. And yet twice, they had led us to places where no living patient waited. Now, every time the speakers crackle overhead, my chest tightens. I wait for the chime, for the voice of the operator. But sometimes, in the back of my mind, I still hear it. That thin, fragile voice echoing in the silence. Code blue, hurry, and I pray it never calls my name. Night shift does something to time. It stretches, it breathes, it listens. I've learned the rhythm of it. The beeps, the pumps, the soft shuffle of rubber soles. I know which alarms are urgent and which are needy. I know when fear is real and when it's just caffeine and lack of sleep. That night, fear was real. I was charting at 1:47 a.m. The unit was calm. 6 telemetry beds, 2 fresh posts, 1 confused gentleman who tried to climb out of bed every hour on the hour. The air smelled like chlorhexidine coffee and warm plastic. Typical. The overhead clicked. A small pop, then silence. We all paused. You learn to hold your breath when the speakers crackle. Code blue. East wing for C. Bed 12. Every head lifted. We don't have a 4C, not anymore. The charge nurse muttered it first. 4C sealed renovation, asbestos. I felt it in my bones. That old wing, drywall over steel. Paper signs turning yellow. No patients, no staff, no power. The speakers clicked again. Louder. Code blue. East Wing 4C. Bed 12. Respond. Training wins. We moved. We pulled the crash cart. I grabbed the airway bag and the backboard and we ran. But it didn't feel like running. It felt like being pulled. Elevator. Down a floor. Ding. The doors opened slow, like the building wanted us to think twice. The hallway lights buzzed. One flickered. The kind of flicker that makes your eyes water. We turned the corner toward the east wing. My shoes stuck slightly with each step, like the wax hadn't dried. The sealed doors were dead ahead. Heavy drywall over glass. Danger signs taped crooked, dust in the seams. No one had touched this hall in years. Except the door was open. The drywall panel leaned aside like a shoulder nudged it. Just enough for a cart to slip through. My mouth went dry. I tasted copper. You seeing this? I asked no one and everyone. The charge nurse lifted her radio. Security. East wing is open. We're responding. Static answered. Not just static, breathing, slow, wet. Then a click. Silence. We squeezed the crash cart through the gap, past the panel. The wing beyond looked the way abandoned places always look. More space than necessary. Too much echo. The smell of dust and old glue. Bed 12, I said, because saying something keeps you human. Signs still hung over doorways. A peel of blue tape. A room with a window facing the hall. Glass fogged from the inside. We pushed in. Monitors dark. Bed made. Corners crisp. The ceiling vent whispered, but the thermostat was dead. No files. No sharps container. No oxygen flow meters. I touched the bed rail. It was cold enough to bite. False alarm, one of the residents said, trying on bravado like a coat that didn't fit. The overhead speakers popped again. In that empty room, above our heads, stay, a voice whispered. Not the operator. Not a man, not a woman. Thin, child soft. I felt the hair rise along my arms under the gown. Who's there? I asked. No answer, but something moved at the edge of my vision. A shadow where no one stood. The four-pole trembled. Just once, as if a hand had brushed it. The crash cart monitor blinked on by itself. A strip across the tiny screen, flatline, then a single spike. Then a rhythm. Slow, too slow, 32 beats per minute. I checked the cart leads, nothing connected. No patient, no skin, no reason. Turn it off, the resident said, voice low. I didn't. I couldn't. My fingers wouldn't obey. Instead, I scanned the room, the way nurses do. Corners, sockets, bed breaks. You fall back on routine. You cradle the terror with tasks. I walked to the bathroom. The door was open. The mirror over the sink was covered in brown paper, taped carelessly. I could see myself in the torn slit. My face looked older, drawn, my eyes too bright. Something knocked on the hall glass. 3 hard raps. Deliberate. We all turned, no one there. The corridor stretched away, dim, hazy. The sound vibrated. The metal door frame under my palm. The overhead clicked again. Code blue. Bed 12. Begin compressions. The words slid around my spine. I stared at the empty mattress. At the perfect pillow. At the impression I swore I could see. Shallow. Like a head had just been there and lifted away. I'm calling it, the charge nurse whispered. We're leaving now. We pulled the cart back into the corridor. I kept glancing over my shoulder, certain the bed would be occupied if I looked long enough. It stayed made. Empty, patientless. Wrong. At the elevator, the call button glowed before we touched it. The doors opened. Inside, every floor light was off. All but B basement. We hadn't pressed anything. The doors began to close. Hold it, the resident said. Arm out. The doors stopped. We squeezed in. The elevator shuddered and started down. Even though I was jabbing 3 with my thumb, hard enough to hurt. The panel didn't care. Basement air is a different kind of cold. It gets under your clothes. It eats the heat from your bones. The morgue sits to the right. Engineering far left. In between forgotten storage and the old laundry corridor. The overhead crackled down there too. Somehow, code blue, basement, receiving bay, no 1 pages to the morgue. The words felt like a joke with teeth. We rolled the cart. The wheels rattled against cracked tile. A single fluorescent tube buzzed over the bay door, strobing us into light and dark, like frames from a bad movie. The bay was empty. The loading door shut. A single gurney stood against the wall. Old, the kind with squeaky wheels and a bent frame, the kind we don't use anymore. On the gurney lay a wristband, paper yellowed. It shouldn't have survived down here, but it had. I picked it up. My hands shook. There was a name. First initial, last name, date of birth. My stomach dropped. It was my last name, my exact birthday. Someone screwing with us, the resident said, but his voice was thin. His eyes wouldn't meet mine. I flipped the band, the back, a number in fat black marks, MRN. I knew that sequence. It was my employee number. Backwards, the overhead. Again, compressions. The crash cart monitor snapped to life. Numbers, rhythm, 32 beats per minute, then 31, then 30. I placed the band back on the gurney like it was a sleeping thing. I stepped back. My chest felt tight, not panic tight, heavy tight, a pressure that pressed from inside out. My hand went to my sternum without permission. "Hey," the charge nurse said softly. "You okay?" I nodded because that's what nurses do. We nod. We say fine. We keep moving. We rode the elevator up. The panel finally obeyed our floor. Doors opened. The unit waited with its ordinary hum. The board flickered alive with new data. I walked straight to the desk, to the computer, to logic. 2 active charts blinked. Same name. Same date of birth. Same MRN. 1 location. 4C bed 12. 1 location. Our unit, bed 5. Bed 5's patient was my confused gentleman. Alive. Sleeping crooked in his sheets. Bed alarms off. His monitor flashed a heart rate. He'd been in the 70s all night. We rushed him, sternal rub. Oxygen on stat vitals. He opened his eyes, startled, breathing fast, heart rate climbing back to 60, then 68. On the screen at the station, 4C's phantom chart mirrored the climb. 60, 68, 70. Documenting, the resident whispered, but his fingers hovered above the keys, paralyzed. I scanned the room for normal things, tubing for sight, Foley, anything to anchor me. My chest pressure eased, then returned, then eased again, matching the monitor like a metronome. The overhead clicked, not the operator now. The same thin voice, closer, "Help me." I turned toward the hallway. The words weren't coming from the speakers. They were coming from the empty room across the pod, the one waiting for morning admission, the one with the curtains folded and the pump still bagged in plastic. The door was open. The bed was made. The pillow had a shallow dip. "Who are you?" I asked. My voice sounded wrong in my throat. The answer wasn't words. It was 3 hard knocks. Door frame. Hollow, exact. Everyone heard them. No one moved. Security finally radioed back. "East wing is sealed. No breach. Cameras show. Nothing." The guard hesitated. Except at 147. Hallway outside 4C. A team running a gurney. Couldn't see faces, just shadows. Then the feed cut. Shadows running a gurney. We hadn't been alone. I went back to the station and pulled up the duplicate chart. I clicked the band field. A number appeared. I didn't want to read it, but I did. My employee number. Backwards. Again, the overhead made one last sound that night. A tone I'd never heard. Not the code chime, not the fire bell. A simple single note, clear, pure, pure. Then the operator.com, as ever. Staff emergency. Nurse on unit. Assist immediately. A pause. My name. Every eye turned to me. The child's voice whispered from somewhere I couldn't find. "Help me." The pressure in my chest lifted all at once. I could breathe. My heartbeat steadied in my ears. On the monitor, the phantom rhythm flattened. No spikes. No noise. Just a straight line across a place no one should have been. We filed the reports we could file. System glitches. Brief desaturation. Equipment variances. We do that because hospitals live on paperwork and proof. But proof fails sometimes. The building keeps its own records. In its walls, in its vents, in the spaces no one walks anymore. I still work nights. I still listen to the hiss of oxygen and the click of pumps. I still answer emergency alerts quickly because seconds matter. But when the speakers crackle and the clock reads 147, I feel the air change. I hold my breath. I wait for a name, for a room that doesn't exist, for 3 knocks. And if I hear that small voice again, if it asks me to stay day and tea, know if I will. Because some codes aren't for saving, they're for remembering, and some hospitals don't forget. It was one of those nights where the hospital seemed to breathe on its own. The air vents hummed like a tired sigh, the fluorescent lights flickered with a pulse that felt almost alive, and the silence between the beeping monitors pressed against your ears until you swore you could hear your own heartbeat echoing in the walls. I had just finished checking on my patients when the overhead crackled. We all froze. That sound always meant trouble code blue, rapid response, fire drill, but what we heard made no sense. A flat, hollow voice filled the speakers. Not the crisp tone of our operators, not the polite automated system. This was low, distorted, like someone speaking through water. Code blue, room 509, immediate response. The charge nurse frowned. 509's been closed for months. We don't even use that floor, but protocol is protocol. When the system calls, you run. I pushed the crash cart into the elevator with 2 other nurses, a resident, and respiratory. No one spoke. The ride up felt longer than it should. When the doors opened, the 5th floor greeted us with darkness. The overhead lights were dead, the floor sealed off for renovation after a pipe burst. The air smelled of mold and rust. We wheeled the cart down the corridor. Our footsteps echoed like we weren't the only ones there. Room 509 waited at the end, its door half open, swinging slowly on its hinges. Inside, it was bare. No bed, no machines, just cracked tiles, peeling paint, and a rusted gurney shoved into a corner. Yet the overhead in the room flicked on again, and the same watery voice whispered, "Begin compressions." The monitor on the cart beeped to life. A green line scrawled across the black screen. Flat line, then a single spike, then flat again. The resident leaned over the machine, whispering, "There's no leads connected. This isn't possible." The gurney screeched an inch across the floor by itself. The sound was so sharp it rattled my teeth. I wanted to run, we all did. But our training wouldn't let us. We're wired to respond, to help, even when we don't understand what we're helping. I found myself standing in front of the empty gurney. My gloved hand brushed against something on the metal frame. Paper, a hospital wristband. I lifted it closer. The name was written in faded ink. Not the patient in 509. Not anyone I recognized. It was my name. My chest tightened. I tried to breathe. The band slipped from my fingers, landing on the tile with a sound far too loud for something so light. The overhead blared again, louder this time. Code blue. Nurses station. Now. We ran back down the corridor, shoving the cart into the elevator. The doors groaned shut and rattled us down to the 3rd floor. When the doors opened, the unit looked wrong. The lights were dimmer, tinted yellow. The air smelled like old smoke, though nothing burned. Patients lay in their beds, but no monitors beeped. No IVs dripped. No one breathed. At the nurses' station, a figure sat in my chair. Their back was to us. White hospital gown, hair hanging down in wet strands, shoulders rising and falling, ragged and slow. "Excuse me," I heard my own voice crack. The figure turned slightly, not fully, just enough for me to see the corner of a face. My face, older, sunken eyes clouded and gray. It spoke in that same watery voice, though the lips barely moved. "You answered." I couldn't move. My heart slammed so loud it drowned the silence. My hand shook, clenching the handle of the cart. The figure stood. The gown dragged across the linoleum, wet with something darker than water. It raised one trembling hand and pointed at me. The overhead clicked again. Time of death. Nurse, the lights above us flared bright white, then snapped out. For a second, the entire hospital sank into pitch black. My body screamed to run, but my legs locked in place, and in that suffocating dark, I felt it against someone small, someone childlike, pressing their hand into mine, whispering, "Stay." When the lights returned, the figure was gone. The patients breathed. The machines beeped. The hallway smelled like antiseptic again. The charge nurse touched my arm. "You okay?" I nodded, but my wrist burned. I looked down. The wristband was back, curled tight around me. My name still written in that faded ink. I never told administration. None of us did. What would we write? Emergency alert from a floor that doesn't exist. Duplicate me in the morgue. My own wristband on an empty bed. They'd call it stress. A malfunction. A nurse who cracked under pressure. But every night, when the overhead clicks, I feel it again, the whisper. The weight of a small, unseen hand. And I know what's coming. Because hospitals are not just places of healing, they're doorways. And sometimes, in the quiet hours, they call for someone who hasn't died yet. One night I know, it will be me. The hospital at night is a place of echoes. Every hallway hums with machines. Every shadow feels too long. You learn to tune it out, to walk steady, to trust the rhythm of alarms and voices. But some nights, the building whispers back at you. It was 3:12 a.m. when I heard it, not over the intercom this time, not even in a patient room. I was in the supply closet, pulling for tubing, when my pager lit up. Code blue, chapel. I froze. The chapel. That didn't make sense. We never code in there. It's not connected to the system at all. The code blue calls only trigger from monitored units. I see you, telemetry. The chapel is just a quiet room with stained glass and old hymn. I stepped into the hall. The charge nurse was staring at her pager too. We locked eyes, both knowing we had no reason to be sprinting toward the chapel, yet our bodies moved anyway. The crash cart's wheels squealed against the tile as we pushed it through the hushed corridors, our footsteps chasing us like an echo. When we reached the chapel, the doors were already ajar. Inside, dim light spilled through colored glass, bathing the empty pews in red and blue. The altar was bare. No patient, no equipment, no reason for an alert. "Check anyway," the resident whispered. His voice cracked. We split up, searching the corners. Behind the altar, in the tiny sacristy, nothing. The room smelled of candle wax and old flowers. My pulse was racing. I could feel the adrenaline, but it had nowhere to go. No chest compressions. No defibrillator pads life to save. Then the overhead cracked again. This time, the voice was softer. "Don't leave." We froze. It wasn't the operator. It wasn't even human. The words dragged like they'd traveled a long distance. One of the respiratory therapists whispered, "Did you hear that?" We all had. The crash cart monitor flickered on, though nothing was connected. A heart rate scrolled across the screen, 40, 39, 37. The beeping slowed. I stepped toward the screen. My reflection looked wrong in the glass. The eyes staring back at me weren't mine. They were sunken, almost gray. I blinked. The face held a tired, older version of me. My chest tightened. My throat felt raw. The monitor beeped again, 30 beats per minute. The charge nurse slammed the power off, but the sound didn't stop. Beep, 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 louder now, echoing through the chapel. Though the monitor was dark, I couldn't move. Something inside me knew this wasn't a mistake. Something was practicing on us, testing us. Later, security reviewed the system. The logs showed activation from the chapel's non-existent code panel. They even pulled camera footage. The feed showed the chapel empty until 3:12. Then, for exactly 45 seconds, the screen filled with static. After that, the doors to the chapel appeared shut tight, like no one had gone inside at all. That morning, no report was filed. Again, just system error. We all signed it. What else could we do? But the memory stayed with me. And the next week it happened again. Another alert. Another impossible location. This time, the old surgical theater, closed decades ago. I refused to go, but others ran. They found the room open, lights flickering, the faint smell of smoke in the air, as if cautery pens were still burning. Every time, the pattern is the same. A false alert, an empty room, the monitor on the cart showing a failing rhythm that doesn't exist. Then silence. The older nurses whisper about it in the break room. They say the hospital remembers. That the building itself tries to call us when a life is slipping away, even if the body is already gone. Some talk about the children who died in the old pediatric ward. When the oxygen system failed decades ago, they say their voices still call out for help when the clock hits the small hours. I never asked to know those stories, but now they echo inside me too, because the last time the overhead clicked, it wasn't a code blue, it was my name. No room number, no unit, just my name. And for a moment, I swear I felt a tiny hand slip into mine. Cold, fragile, a child's whisper against my ear. "You're next." The speaker went dead. The monitors resumed their rhythm. The hospital exhaled again, and I stood there, my heart racing, wondering if I'd just heard my own emergency alert. I've walked these halls for years, but that night still claws at me. Hospitals are supposed to be predictable. Alarms mean something. Pages come for a reason. But sometimes, the building calls you even when no one is there. It was nearly 4 a.m. when the overhead cut through the silence. Code blue, OR6. Code blue. Every nurse at the station froze. Or 6. That wing was shut down months ago, black mold in the vents, sealed off with thick plastic. No patients, no staff, no surgeries. Still, training tells you don't question it, just move. I grabbed the crash cart. The resident was already running beside me, gloves half on. The hallway stretched ahead like a tunnel, half lit and buzzing. The plastic barrier to the abandoned door wing was torn open. The tape dangled like fingers. Inside OR6 was a tomb. The operating lights swung overhead, though the power should have been cut. The table sat in the middle of the room, draped with a spotless sheet. No instruments, no trays, no patient. We stood there, breathing hard, adrenaline begging for a purpose. The air smelled sharp, like iron, like cauterized flesh. I felt the urge to reach for the sheet on the table. Something in me needed to see what was beneath. The overhead crackled again. Continue compressions. The crash cart monitor blinked to life on its own. A heart rhythm appeared. Flatline, then a sluggish pulse, then flat again, but no one had touched it. The resident's face went white. He whispered, "This isn't a code, it's a rehearsal." Before I could ask what he meant, the overhead snapped again. A sound like breathing filled the speakers, rough and wet. Then a whisper, this time clearer, "She's not waking up." We all turned toward the table. The sheet rose. just slightly, like something beneath it had taken a breath. I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. The charge nurse yanked me by the arm, dragging me back into the hallway. The sheet collapsed flat again as the door slammed shut behind us. We didn't file a report. We never do. They'd call it stress, or a glitch, or both. But we knew that voice wasn't ours. That code didn't come from our system. 2 days later, I was on the same shift. My badge wouldn't scan into the medroom. The computer froze when I typed my login. And then, at exactly 4 a.m., the overhead clicked again. Code blue, OR6, nurse on call. She's not waking up. This time, it didn't echo. It whispered directly into my ear. I dropped the chart I was holding. Papers scattered like pale leaves across the floor. My hands trembled as I pressed my stethoscope against my chest, half expecting silence, but no, there it was, faint, slowing. The charge nurse rushed over, asking if I was okay. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say it was nothing, but I couldn't get the words out. And in that moment, I saw the plastic sheeting down the hole ripple, as if someone inside was breathing, waiting. Now, every time 4 a.m. approaches, I feel it. The air grows heavy, the vents groan, and I wait for the overhead to crackle, because I know one night soon, when the voice whispers again, it won't be calling from some forgotten room. It'll be calling for me. So tell me, if you were working that night, would you have stepped inside or would you have run the other way? If this story gave you chills, don't forget to double tap the screen, hit subscribe, and share it with someone who loves dark hospital mysteries as much as you do. Your support keeps these haunting stories alive, so stay tuned, because more terrifying tales are coming soon, if you dare.